Welcome to the Our State Book Club podcast. I'm your host, New York Times bestselling author and North Carolina native Wiley Cash. In today's episode, we visit Matthews to spend some time with Meagan Church, author of The Mad Wife. We'll talk about her growing up outside of North Carolina and what has led her to write about the Old North State. Meagan, thank you so much for having us in your home.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is such a beautiful neighborhood. I was telling you when I got here that I grew up not too far from here in Gastonia, and this feels so nostalgic and resonant of my childhood.
Yeah.
But you grew up in Indiana.
I did.
You
yes.
did not grow up in a neighborhood.
No, I did
so
not.
what was life like growing up in rural Indiana?
Yeah, so I literally grew up in the middle of a cornfield. My parents purchased an acre of my grandparents' 100-acre farm, and they put a 1970s ranch down on the corner, a dirt road teed into our house. So I was always surrounded by corn or soybeans, or there was one year that a neighbor planted sunflowers in the field right next to us.
Was that like a big
amazing.
deal? Yeah, big deal.
Yeah,
big
so
change.
beautiful. Yes. Nice change up
Yeah.
from corn and beans.
Yeah.
But it was very quiet. And my grandparents were my closest neighbors. And so I always wondered what it would be like to live in more of a neighborhood setting. And so my kids are getting that experience, but for me as an adult, it's like, wait, why don't we have as much distance as I did growing up?
And these are big lots, and it's very wooded, but for you, it probably still feels a
It
little
still feels
bit...
a little claustrophobic at times, but yes,
yeah.
the trees, we almost feel like we're in a mountain setting because of
Yeah.
how hugged we are by trees,
Yeah,
especially on this lot. And so that gives me a little bit of that protection. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
So what did you do like when you were growing up on this farm in this cornfield? Did you play outside a lot?
A
Did
lot.
you read a lot? Did
played.
you want to be a writer? What were you doing?
Right. Yeah. I played outside a lot. I rode my bike a lot up and down the road. And I have a brother who's 4 years older than me. So I was kind of that annoying, pesky little sister that he didn't want to spend a lot of time with. But we would still make up games together. And that's the thing is I've thought a lot about, what I wanted to be and do when I was a kid. I wasn't the type of young writer who actually wrote on the page, but I imagined in my mind.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of storytelling. It was a lot of make-believe play, that kind of thing, whether inside the house or outside the house. We had hard winters, so I would spend time in the basement making up, little make-believe towns and villages and things like that down there.
Probably a lot of boredom that led to a lot of creativity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy the boredom as a kid, but now I really do see it as a
'cause
gift.
that's where play comes from, and that's where creativity comes
Yep.
from. And as a writer, you know that in your mind you're always writing.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be at the desk,
Yes.
but in one way or another, you're always writing and thinking about the book you're working on.
Yes.
So you're growing up in rural Indiana on
Mm-hmm.
this farm, and I'm wondering about what were your early literary experiences? Was it at school? Was it at church? Was it at a library? Was it your parents reading to you? And who were the authors influencing you when you were that age?
Yeah. I always feel bad answering this question because I didn't have a strong literary childhood. Now, my parents set the example of reading for me in reading the newspaper every day.
Oh, that's all my dad read. My dad
Yes.
never read one of my novels, read the newspaper every day.
Yes,
But-
exact. Same with my dad. Yep. My mom, every once in a while, would read, Flowers in the Attic or, something
my mom
like that.
only read novels with buxom women running away from castles and the Bible.
Yeah. Yes.
But
Of course.
that's kind of what my mom did.
Yes. Yeah. And so for me, I was a good student. I did my homework. I would be exhausted from homework. And so reading was a little bit more of a chore. I was also a slow reader. So but there were a few books that really ignited my imagination. Ramona Quimby was one of them. I loved the Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Me too. I love those.
And then I like to go back through and see what all the different possibilities would have been. But it was really in high school, and it was Catcher in the Rye.
Okay.
And it was discovering Holden's voice that really then ignited the reading passion in me. So I was a little later. I don't have the Anne of Green Gables and Little House on the Prairie memories that a lot of early readers do, but I came to own it later in life. But again, a lot of the storytelling for me was in my mind, or it was movies and television too. I mean, I always loved story in just a variety of forms.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up at about the same time. it's hard to overstate how important television was,
Mm,
how important evening sitcoms were.
yes.
Like Family Ties and Who's the Boss, like
Yes.
your conceptions of character, situation,
Hmm.
um, that really benefited me watching
Yes.
that stuff,
Yeah.
and right now my 9-year-old and I, she might be a little young, so don't judge me, viewers and listeners. We've gone back and we've started watching Friends
Oh, yeah.
over.
Hmm.
That show is amazingly written.
It is.
When the
Yes.
characters appear the first time, you know exactly who they are.
Exactly. My 14-year-old just started watching Friends,
Yeah.
and it's the same experience. I was kind of in the room during the first few episodes, and I was shocked by
Yeah.
how well that show was formed from the beginning
Yeah.
when it came to the characters,
Yeah.
and everything is so impressive.
So, were you a library kid? Did
No,
you order books
no.
from the mall? How did you come into
The mall,
contact with it?
Walden Bookstore.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
and this is the thing, I
you
might not
lived
have,
for it.
yes, I might not have spent a lot of time reading, but I always loved the aesthetic of books.
Yeah,
So whenever we would go to the mall, which was a treat because it was like
sure.
45 minutes
Yeah,
away,
yeah.
but I would
Did you
want to
get your
go into
Orange
Walden.
Julius and then go
Oh,
down to Walden
yes.
Books? Yeah.
Yes, yes, definitely. And my mom, one of her biggest regrets, even still today, she regrets not taking me to the library
Yeah.
more. And I'm like, Mom, look, I turned out okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all right.
Mom, it
Everything
was
is okay.
far. Let's be fair.
It
Was
was.
far.
It
Yeah.
was.
My
Yes.
parents took us to the library. My mom, I think, because that was a place she could just like kind of turn us loose
Yeah.
and do what she needed to do. And it was kind of like built-in daycare.
Right.
And
Right.
I was a big reader. My little brother, not so much, but it was a place, and it was close to our town. And we didn't have a bookstore really. It was in town, and so the library was like the place where you could kind of not be a parent. She
Right.
would look at what she wanted to look at, and then we would do what we wanted to do.
Yes.
So one thing I wanted to ask you is that all of your novels, and we've got them all here, and it's funny that you mentioned Catcher in the Rye, because this is kind of the ultimate coming of age story. Certainly for readers who are coming of age when they're reading Holden Caulfield. Um, all of your novels, to one degree or another, are coming of age stories, which is honestly my favorite kind of story to read, because I love the moment when the character goes from not knowing to knowing,
Yeah.
and they can never go back.
Right.
If they learn like adults lie, people are deceptive, they can never unknow that. That's
Right.
innocence lost. I love that structure of a book.
Hmm.
So in your novels, your characters are learning something, usually about themselves, sometimes about society, sometimes about their families. But your readers in your novels are learning about history. So how do you as a writer kind of partner this historical coming of age for the reader, learning about, the psychological pressures of housewives in the 1950s and this barbaric treatment, or homes for girls, homes for unwed mothers? How do you balance that as a writer, knowing that my character is going to have a new experience and my reader is going to have a new experience?
Right.
Is that something you set out to do?
Yeah, it's striking a balance, right? Because I really overall I just want the reader to be immersed in that character. And for me, with the historical element, whether it was eugenics with the first, maternity homes with the second, or hysteria with the third, those are those exterior pressures
Yeah.
that are placed on the character. So any sort of historical element that is actually used within the narrative itself is only there for the purpose of the character.
Yeah.
I've worked with writers as they're trying to develop their craft, who a lot of times when they're writing historical, they want the info dump. They want you,
Yes.
the reader, to
Yeah.
know every single thing that they have
I did the
researched.
research. Here's all of it.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. And our job is to explore the character,
Yeah.
and any historical parts of it is just there for the benefit of what that character's journey and story is. And my agent used this analogy with me that she is embarrassed, but I'm going to say it anyway, is I really, in my stories, I want to have more of the cerebral elements to
Sure.
it, more of what she called the broccoli.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we got to give them the cheese. We got to give them that thing that doesn't have quite as much nutrition, but it's what makes the book compelling.
Sure.
It's what makes it more page turning. And so for me, it's that constant balance between giving them that depth that I want to really go fully into, while also remembering that it has to be an enjoyable read that they want to get lost
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. I love what you said about exterior elements coming to bear on the character. A lot of commercial fiction, it's about the exterior plot that has come to visit the character.
Right.
Somebody from the past has come back. There's a bomb under the White House. Brad, Chad, Thad, Tad's got to blow out the fuse.
Right.
So you're doing that, but you also have this interior pressure, which is the province of what we call literary fiction. So you have these big historical moments, eugenics, homes for unwed mothers, hysteria, pressing in from the outside. But then you also have this, especially in The Mad Wife, this heartbreaking character development where this character is experiencing this interior journey that is particular only to them.
Right.
You know, Henry's not caught up in the journey. Bitsy's not caught up in the journey. I'm focusing on the Mad Wife specifically. It is very specific to that one character.
Right.
Do you like that balance of interior, exterior plot and pressure? Trying to achieve that?
I would love to just stay in the interior, period.
Yeah.
Like the exterior is what I have to fight for fight with the most and really incorporating into the novel. Because for me, if it was just me sitting alone and writing only for myself and not considering marketability and commercial viability and all of that kind of stuff, it would be just that interiority of the character. I was talking to an author friend yesterday that she is, she's on her, I don't even know, 10th book or something, and she is struggling with the stakes of the story she's telling. She knows everything else about the story, but the stakes. And I said, oh my gosh, like that hit me in my soul because yes, that is where I continually struggle because for me, I am so fascinated by the depth of the character, like what they're experiencing, what their motivations are, the obstacles they're up against. But then it's like, oh, we need plot. We need stakes.
Oh my God. That's the hard. That's the hard. That's the hard thing for me. Plot is the hard thing for me. When I think about, like the books that I try to write or The Mad Wife, I think about that exterior pressure or that exterior plot is something that has brought all of the characters together.
Right.
And then the interior pressure is particular to Lulu, for example, in this book. So you grew up in Indiana, and I'm going to ask you more in depth about this a little bit later. You grew up in Indiana, and y'all moved here in 2014?
2015.
2015.
Yes.
2015 to Matthews. And you have published at a rapid clip. And not like fluffy books that you dashed off at Starbucks from 9 and 10 a.m., while people were doing other things. I mean, these are big books, and you did them 3 years in a row. What was it about moving to North Carolina that got that going?
Yeah. So part of it really is just the inspiration of the place. Part of it was also the life stage I was in. So my 3 kids had just reached the age where all of them were in school all day long.
Yeah.
And so that afforded me the time to really pour into these stories. Now, yes, I published at a rapid rate of, 2023 was my debut, followed by 2024, and now 2025.
It made me feel like such a loser when I kind of knew that, but then I looked up the hard numbers and was like, what am I doing with this?
No. But you also have to realize that I was working on these for years, right?
Sure.
So The Last Carolina Girl, I think I started writing probably in 2017, I think it was. So I was working on that for years. And when I was in the query stage with that, I was working on The Girls We Sent Away.
Yeah.
So when I signed with my agent and then with my editor, The Girls We Sent Away, the rough draft was already done.
Yeah.
And then I did not start work on The Mad Wife until it was September of 2023.
Yeah.
So while the publishing rate seems fast, the writing took place at a different time. There was more space in that time period.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. That makes me feel better.
You're doing fine.
That makes me feel better. We'll be right back after this break.
This episode of the Our State Book Club podcast is sponsored by Deerfield Episcopal Retirement Community in Asheville, North Carolina.
If you're enjoying my conversation with Meagan Church, author of The Mad Wife, please join us live for Books in the Barn at Fearington Village on Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Meagan and I will be there with Our State's Editor-in-Chief, Elizabeth Hudson, for an evening of cocktails, hors d'oeuvres, and literary conversation. Once again, that's Books in the Barn at Fearington Village on Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Get your tickets at ourstate.com/trips.
We are back in Matthews with author Meagan Church. So, Meagan, we are sitting here. We've got your previous novels stacked up, and we have Mad Wife on the top. And when I first saw this book and I saw the title, I was like, this book's going to be huge. I mean, what's it about? I don't care. Title, jacket, it's beautiful. I immediately wanted to reach for it. So can you tell me about not only the book itself, but the package, the title, it just feels like something that's fully formed.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of work went into
Yes.
it, but it feels like a book that just arrives in the
Yeah.
box.
Yeah. Well, first of all, can I call you next time I have author
Yes.
insecurity
Yeah,
that I'm
yeah.
not sure? I'm still,
I will make you feel better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because every step of the process, there was doubt, complete self-doubt, even leading up to launch, even, with the buzz the book was getting, still there was doubt. But so, essentially the short version of what The Mad Wife is about is it's a 1950s housewife in a time when hysteria was a blanket diagnosis. She's fighting to prove her sanity. And the idea of this book came together, the whole process of the book really came together much faster than with my first two. Of course, I was still very much in a learning stage and developing both of those. At the same time, as well as I do that every book is different.
Yeah.
And even though we think, well, we've told this many stories at this point, I should be able to whip this out quickly, that doesn't always happen. Thankfully, that is what happened with The Mad Wife, that the idea came after rejection, actually. I had pitched 2 other novel ideas to my editor, which she did not feel were ready quite yet. And so then I happened upon the history of hysteria, just got fascinated by that concept. And that was in September of 23. The first draft that my editor saw landed on her desk in September of 24. So it was 1 year basically of the research, the writing and rewriting before it got to my editor. And then it was on bookshelves a year later in September of 25. So it was a fast process by publishing terms,
Sure.
but it was also very good. It was fast because writing this was so immersive, being locked inside of Lulu's mind. I mean, writing this one, I get into all of my main characters, but this was a whole other level to me. I had moments of realizing why there's this, sort of cliche, the authors can go insane, because I was living in her story world so intensely. And so I'm glad that I was not there for too long, because when you're writing the story of a woman potentially losing her mind, then it can make you sort of question certain things about reality as well. But, as we were talking earlier about the interior versus exterior, and I was really concerned, is this too quiet? Is there too much interior life to this that it's not hitting the right notes, right? And then in the editing process, I was also up against a lot of self-doubt when my editor returned to me in the second round of developmental edits a 12-page outline of suggested changes that I could make to the novel. And I stayed
She's like,
true.
what about vampires?
Yeah, nearly. That's what it felt like. Yes.
Time travel? Just putting it out there.
Just, what if,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yes. And so thankfully I had been so immersed in Lulu's mind that I knew in my gut what this story was really about. And so I needed to stay true to it. I needed to fix things in the manuscript, but I needed to stay true to Lulu and her story.
Yeah.
And so there was, like I said, every step of the way, even the Mad Wife, the title, my working title was The Hysterical Housewife. And when I was on tour for The Girls We Sent Away, whenever I would say that title in front of a crowd, there would be an audible reaction.
Yeah, because the word hysterical is so, loaded now.
Exactly. And so I told my editor this. Sourcebooks likes to, they like to test every title and every cover to make sure that it's really going to hit the target audience, right? And they did not think Hysterical Housewife was strong enough. And I was fighting hard for it. And we went back and forth. And finally one day I said, I don't know, what about The Mad Wife? And it tested high and I relented. I was like, whatever, let's just go with it. And now that the whole package is together, I see it, I get it. And now that I'm on tour and saying the title over and over again, I'm very glad it's not The Hysterical Housewife. But yeah, it was a process to get it to come together as it did. But it formed in a way that was just beyond my expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a book in the bookshelf. Face out, you're going to reach for that book. It's just the jacket is so beautiful, the title, and then you open to the flyleaf and see what it's about. It's just a great package. You mentioned being in the depths of the psychological realism of Lulu's character, and it was an experience for the reader that to me felt very laced with menace.
Mm.
There's always this undercurrent of feeling unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
That you do a great job of putting the reader in that headspace.
Mm.
And what I loved about it is these domestic responsibilities that we can easily dismiss. Somebody extra showing up for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's a new dishwasher. They become these heightened moments of fear or uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's even a moment Lulu's husband Henry thinks that part of her struggle is that washing the dishes takes too long.
Right.
So he gets her this dishwasher on wheels. He's like,
Uh-huh.
you can just put it in the pantry whenever you're not using it. But it
Right.
doesn't go in. It's always in. It's always out. And she literally is trapped in this moment by the dishwasher with this man's kind of confronting her in a way that's very uncomfortable and very loaded and very threatening. And I was like, oh my God, she's trapped by the dishwasher. So the stakes, you never allow the stakes to not be heightened.
Mm.
Were you consciously doing that? Were you hitting these things and saying, okay, I gotta make the reader uncomfortable? Because I believe when the reader's uncomfortable, that means they're engaged.
Yeah.
And they're not sitting back, they're leaning forward. Like,
Right.
were you thinking about that?
Wiley, I am so skilled that of course, I know. I mean, some of it really, I think, is just natural progression of storytelling,
Yeah.
And it was because I knew that we had to continue to go more interior, deeper, darker, right?
Yeah. And it keeps being heightened.
Exactly. But, some of it was personal experience that I have experienced. Some of it is just stories of friends and others as well. But my mother, who has struggled with anxiety her entire life, she was reading it and she had a hard time getting through it the first time.
Yeah.
She
I
said
can see that.
she said it's too real. And then she asked me, "Did I tell you these stories?" And I
Oh
said,
my God.
I was like, "Mom, no, you didn't tell me this before." And so to hear that from her also made me know and realize that I got the story right.
Yeah.
But one of the stories is actually my own, where toward the beginning, Lulu is reflecting back on what we would now know as postpartum depression with her first child, where she was crying over a sock. And that was a moment I experienced. With my first, I was not ready to be a mother. I had never changed a diaper before. I was alone in the hospital and I needed to change his diaper. And he was flailing his legs and got a sock into his diaper. And there were no more clean socks in the room. And I was standing there sobbing, still exhausted from,
Yes.
labor the day before. And my midwife walked in that moment and saw me and said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I just need a sock."
Yeah.
And so there are moments in it that are so, I think, typical for so many women. But when you put them all together, it's just, you feel that tension
Yes, yeah.
rising.
There's a North Carolina writer named Alan Gerganis who was on the podcast, I think, last season. And I've heard him say, I don't think he said it on the podcast, but he said, if you write fiction in a way that's honest, a child's christening party can have the same stakes as a national security meeting.
Oh, that's good.
And I think that's true, especially when you're tired, you're overlooked, you've created life, so the chemicals in your body are completely
Out of whack.
out of whack. And it was just so beautifully done, and there were so many instances that were really smart, and a lot of writers listen to this podcast and watch it. And I just want to point out a couple of them. There's a scene where Lulu intuits correctly that her husband might have been talking to somebody about her future, about her current mental state and maybe her future treatment. And she looks out the window and there's a spider catching a moth in the web. And then later there's a moment where she has to take off her wedding rings. And I won't say why. For some medical reasons, and it feels like a symbolic severing in some ways. And I just thought, gosh, this is a clinic about how to use these small emotional moments and then put them in a physical object to give them more meaning that the reader can perceive through that, which is so smart.
Thank you.
That's more of a congratulations
Thank you.
and how did you do that than it is
Right.
than it is a question. But I just really loved that. I do want to ask about, were you aware, and I'm not talking about genre specifically as this monolithic thing, But were you aware of the many braided elements at work in this novel? Because when I first began reading it, the way the neighborhood is presented, and I told you this previously, it's like so sterile and beautiful that it feels gothic and monstrous. And I was like, oh my God, this is a horror novel. And then later I'm like, this is a novel of psychological realism. Oh, this is a novel of domestic life. And all these things are coming into it. Were you aware of those genre threads and kind of writing them, RIDING, writing them into the novel?
No. Should
Oh,
I
really?
say yes though?
It's up to you.
No, for me, I try not to think in terms of genre. To
Yeah.
me, genre is marketing. And I just know the character and I know what her journey is, and that's it. So whatever other elements come into play,
They're
it's just
subconscious, unconscious.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And there have been readers who have been saying the horror elements of it, which really surprises me. I don't read horror. I grew up watching tons of horror,
Yeah.
Stephen King, hello. But for me, I don't read that genre. And even when my publisher was wanting to market it more toward like thriller, psychological suspense, I was nervous about that because I assume readers have certain expectations of those genres. And I didn't know that I hit all of those beats just right because that's not how I planned it. I didn't intentionally build that in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just the story and the character, and these are the threads that wove together.
It feels, when I think about this book visually, it feels very Hitchcock. It feels very close up on Lulu's face with somebody in the background doing something. It just those elements just feel so alive in this to me. It's not a thriller where like there's a ticking clock
Right.
and it's not a bloody horror novel or a slasher. It's none of that. It's this simmering, discomforting journey into a woman's coming to awareness while feeling that she is not in a moment of awareness,
Right.
but she is. She is very aware of what's going on. So, I know that you wrote some of this and revised, I think, some of this at a place that we both love, Weymouth. How did Weymouth influence this novel, and how has Weymouth just kind of been a place for you to go in your career? It's a writer's residency down in Southern Pines. So
Yeah.
can you talk about that?
I would love to talk about Weymouth. It was a true gift to me. I really needed to get this draft into solid shape to be able to send to my editor. And, there were times when it felt as though I was transcribing, scenes that Lulu would literally, it felt like she was literally showing them to me. But then there were other times when it was not coming quite as easily. And I knew there were elements that still needed to be strengthened, but I was at a loss. And so I needed some time away. So I have had a lot of author friends recommend Weymouth, and I thought, okay, let's give this a go. And so I arrived, and on the day I arrived, the director asked me what I was working on. And I said, 1950s housewife in a time of hysteria. And she asked me if I knew who Isabel was. I had no idea who Isabel was because I had no idea that there was a haunted history when it comes to Weymouth. And so I was there just for sort of a space to remove myself from, all the tasks of motherhood and everything else where I could just go and focus. But I had no idea that inspiration would come from a very different source than I had ever experienced. And so Isabel was a woman who actually lived at Weymouth for a short time in the 1940s.
It's an old mansion.
Yes, built in what, like 1920s or 10s or something like that.
And built on. It's a very interesting place.
Yes,
architecturally.
Yes. And so Isabel, unfortunately, reached this moment in her life while she was there where the story goes that she went mad or hysterical, and she actually took her life in the room right next to where I was staying. And while Lulu's story is not Isabel's, being there and having some, strange occurrences happen and doors opening and closing and strange sounds in the night and things like that, what I really felt was a renewed sense of purpose of telling a story on behalf of somebody like Isabel, who cannot tell her story, but perhaps had similar experiences to what Lulu did in that era.
Yeah. And the antecedents of this novel, the bell jar, the yellow wallpaper, White Sargasso Sea, all these stories of female madness, you kind of pass through those and come out the other side because we no longer dismiss postpartum depression as hysteria.
Not as much.
Not as much, yeah. Yeah, we shouldn't, I should say, dismiss it as that. And so this is really a journey back through the 1950s to our present moment. as I said earlier, it's a coming of age for readers too.
Right.
Like, how many times have I looked at a mother and said, "You look tired,"
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
How do you do it all? Nobody ever asked Dad that.
No,
Nobody
they
ever asked
don't.
Dad how they do it.
Right.
I'll never forget Lauren Groff in an interview once, an interviewer, I can't remember which book it was, maybe Fates and Furies, asked her, "How do you get so much writing done with young children?" And she said, respectfully, "I refuse to answer that question until more men are asked that."
Yes. Yes. Amen to that.
Yes. And I want to ask you the 5 ways that you feel North Carolina has shaped you as a writer or given you a place to be a writer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are interior and exterior elements that come together in that way for me. I mean, first of all, authors, connecting with authors. Living in Indiana for most of my life, I did not encounter a single author in that time. I knew bloggers, I knew, other types of writers, but no authors. And moving here immediately, I moved into my neighborhood, and Mary Beth Mayhew Whalen used to live in the neighborhood, and we met at a wine and canvas night at the clubhouse.
Yeah.
And it was just like this immediate immersion into connecting with other authors. And so that has been a gift to me, partly because of friendship, partly because of water cooler talk that we can have, and also just advice and helping navigate all of this. But another way is the bookstores, the rich independent bookstores, especially, who they made me a bestseller with The Girls We Sent Away. And so just their continued support has really affected and shaped me.
With the bookstores.
Absolutely, yes. And part of it, too, is just the history, the literary history of the state. Staying at Weymouth really reminded me of that. There are stories of F. Scott Fitzgerald, staying overnight at Weymouth, and just in the Literary Hall of Fame is housed there, too. And it just, it gives me the sense of almost reverence to be in a place where there's such rich literary history like that. Another way is the landscape, which especially comes through, I think, the strongest in The Last Carolina Girl, because nature is nearly a character in and of itself in that story. And I was relatively new to the state when I was writing it, and I was seeing the landscape for the first time with fresh eyes. You can only describe a cornfield or soybean field so many times, so many ways, and Indiana was not the right setting for that book. But by setting it here and just seeing this beautiful state for the first time, it just really made that story, I think, even richer and deeper. But the other way that it has affected me is actually the sense of being in a new home, in a new place, where at first I was really focused on understanding the Southern mentality, right? Even though we only moved within the same country, there are still differences. There are differences, there are similarities. And with the first 2 books, I was really trying to figure out that sort of Southernness. And now I have found myself shifting back to my Midwestern roots, because now that I have been away, I feel like I can examine it in a new way.
Yeah.
So it's really been kind of a gift to me to be removed from my birthplace, from everything that was familiar, so that I can actually see that birthplace now in a new way.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, Meagan, this has been such a treat. Thank you so much for having us in.
Thank you.
Matthews.
Yes, thank you for being here. Thank you for this conversation.
Absolutely.
This episode of the Our State Book Club podcast is sponsored by Deerfield Episcopal Retirement Community in Asheville, North Carolina.
Last year, North Carolina lost one of its champions with the passing of D.G. Martin. D.G. was a tireless public servant and advocate for North Carolina writers. He hosted North Carolina Book Watch for decades, giving countless writers, including myself, an opportunity to share their work with their fellow North Carolinians. D.G. was also an accomplished writer, publishing work on North Carolina cuisine, culture, and literature. I'm proud to dedicate the 2026 season of the Our State Book Club podcast to D.G. Martin.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit, never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be? Will will you see? Sweeter fruit never tasted. Don't turn your back on me. Mountains pushing into the sea. Mountains into the sea.